This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is July 1st, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, and today joined by co-host Luke Sylvia and Kevin Tucker. Boys, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is in Orlando Magic. How are we doing?
I mean, I'm great. It feels like the load has been lifted a little bit, where I didn't believe what anybody was saying about the Magic wouldn't do anything, but at the same time, I was like, please do something significant so that I can just continue trusting this front office. And we'll talk more about it, but KCP checks all the boxes for the identity the Magic have built and give us a glimpse into what they're going to probably just continue looking for in free agency. They don't want to sacrifice defense, potentially. Or maybe they're satisfied with where they're at with KCP, and they're like, okay, we've got enough defensive talent. We can move on and sacrifice some of that defense for offensive gifted players. But regardless, KCP's a fun talent, championship pedigree. I'm on board.
Yeah, where I am right now, just thinking about like the roller coaster ride of the last 24 hours. Obviously, we'll talk about this in a little more detail later, talking about Paul George and Magic getting a meeting and then apparently not get a meeting. By the way, we're recording this at like 9:20 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night. Just a little bit of context in case something happens later tonight. I don't know. We'll see. But the other part of me is like, okay, that's, about half, just under half the money that we have. So what's going to happen to the other half? I'm kind of at this point just like a little bit eager to find out what's next, but maybe we'll get some info right now while we're recording. Who knows? But yeah, as it stands, KCP, cool addition, and we'll talk more about him, of course, as the show goes on.
If you're watching on YouTube and we just seem to be like staring off into space or like checking our phones or something like that, it's because like free agency is still very much going on. Yeah, we're checking our phones to see if anything else crazy has happened. As of now, I think it's been about almost 40 minutes since the Jonas Valanciunas to the Wizards news broke, which surprised us. We don't really understand that for either party, but it's been quite a while since any news has broke, so it should be any minute now until we hear something else. And we'll talk about some of the particulars and maybe what we hope will happen with the Magic's remaining money here over the course of either tonight or the next couple of days. And then later in the episode, we have an interview from producer Kevin that he met with Pat Rooney from the Daily Camera and BuffZone.com. He covers the Colorado University Buffaloes and covered Tristan da Silva, I believe, for his entire career. So Kevin had a great conversation with him. So if you want to hear more about the Magic's new rookie and first-round pick in Tristan da Silva, be sure to stay tuned for that interview a little bit later. But since the last time we recorded, folks, we had the second round of the NBA draft. And I just wanted to ask, did either of you have the ability to sit and watch any of the television coverage of the second round? And just overall, what were your thoughts? And then we'll talk about what the Magic, of course, did.
I personally did not watch any of it.
Nope.
I don't know about Luke.
No, I mean, who was convinced we were going to use that pick anyway? And I'm a Magic fan before I'm an NBA fan, as most of us here are, obviously. So I just had no interest, to be quite honest.
I did think it was kind of cool. The fact that they brought some of these guys like into essentially like a green room and they had like a whole studio set up for the draft. But ultimately it was the Bronny James show for 2-3 hours, whatever it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For me, it was like the Magic traded. We had 47th pick. The Magic made the trade at like 43 or 44, something like that. Like 45 maybe. It was really close to it. I had my phone. I was ready to tune in for the 47th pick. But it happened a couple picks before, so I didn't have to. So yeah, I didn't watch that. I didn't even watch the Bronny pick live. I went and watched it later. So yeah, I didn't tune into it. But it was kind of a cool format. I don't think they'll do the 4 p.m. thing ever again, though. Just because of they only did it this year because of something that was televised Thursday night at like 9 Eastern. That was whatever. But yeah, I don't think they'll do that again.
Which was really, really something. Yeah, the Magic end up moving that 47th pick for like a 2030 and 2031 second round picks. Everybody expected, as always. I think The only second round pick in the Jeff Weltman area that they've used, I believe, has been Caleb Houston. And every other one of those picks they've ended up trading, at some point. So, yeah, not a ton of surprise there. What are your guys' feelings on Bronny James being drafted to the Lakers at 55 and just sort of, the grossness that went into making sure that he was available there at 55? And when I say that, Rich Paul was literally telling teams, don't draft Bronny or we're going to send him to Australia for the year.
That part was stupid. And this is the part where it's hard to feel bad for or give maybe benefit of the doubt to a guy, a superstar son in general when it comes to whatever it is in life, honestly, just because like he's got it made and whatever. But I will say I feel for Bronny James in that because that's not his fault. Like, he wants to do what his dad has done, arguably, and in my opinion, the best to ever do it. Like, that is his father. So I know for his entire life there has been that weight of, I need to be the guy, or I need to make it to the league, at least to, whether LeBron has said this, and I don't think this is the case at all, but to make my dad proud. I want to make it to the league. And so it's awesome that he's there, and there's pictures of like him as a baby sitting next to LeBron, or like as a toddler sitting next to LeBron, and like one of his first couple years in the league. That stuff is cool. The full circle moments are cool. Rich Paul and the negotiations around it to make this happen were gross. And that it's unfortunate because I love it for Bronny because it's just a crazy cool scenario, but just the path to get there. It's like, I wish I didn't know the details of how this happened.
Yeah, it's gross, but I mean, it's what we all expected, I mean, we knew this would happen 12 months ago. It's just kind of the way it is. Not cool in a lot of aspects, but yeah, I 100% agree with what you said. Feel bad for Bronny. It stinks that he's caught up in this. Stinks that he's been the brunt of so many jokes and comments and all that stuff, but it is what it is. I hope for his sake that he plays well, honestly. Like, I want him to go out there and prove to everybody that, yeah, he belongs, because there's a chance he does, But yeah, definitely a little bit of slimy action for sure.
I'm super happy for Bronny. Like, none of this is his fault, and I don't blame him for any of the stuff that was going on. Just like the recent talks of how like LeBron isn't having any influence on where Bronny gets drafted, and like just blatant lies, and then the manipulation to make sure that he's there at 55. Like, gross, but ultimately good for Bronny, and I really do hope that it works out well for him, and I hope he's an NBA guy for a long time.
Sorry, it's also similar. I don't think this happened. Maybe it did before the last episode. Did you guys talk about JJ? I don't remember if you talked about JJ. I haven't talked about JJ.
We haven't talked about
the
JJ.
Lakers. The only thing I was going to say to that, though, number one, former Magic guy, but number two, does anyone believe that LeBron had nothing to do with that? Like, come on. Like, just be honest. Yeah, JJ's my guy. I really wanted him. Cool. Like,
I'm LeBron James. I make stuff happen.
Yeah, when JJ was asked, like, yeah, LeBron's my guy. We talked about it. He was cool, so I wanted the job. Like, don't sit there and tell us that LeBron had nothing to do with it. There's no way. There's just no way. Anyway, that's all.
Liar. Straight up. Always has to lie for whatever reason. Okay, anyways, folks, we're going to bring it back to the Magic here now, I promise. Some Orlando Magic news. Some exciting stuff broke this week. Jamal Mosley, for the second straight summer, is going to be the head coach of the men's USA select team as they prepare for the Olympics. And the USA basketball program is righting one of their wrongs from last summer, where Jalen Suggs was not even invited to take part in the USA select team. This year, he has been invited to play for the men's USA select team. So both of those guys, incredibly deserving. Like, super fulfilling to see Jalen not get the invite last year, have the awesome season that he did. Probably going to get a pretty big pay increase this summer, and now also getting the recognition and playing for the select team.
Yeah, deserved. I think it's going to be awesome to see him, not just, his own teammates on the select team, but, for the week or whatever it is that he's coming up against, not just any like Team USA, like that is like the best. It's the Olympics. So like that is the best group of dudes. And so Jalen's going to get to go up against those guys for like 5 days or whatever their camp is. I don't remember. That's pretty cool. And then also that list of select guys that Jamal Mosley's coaching, Love seeing him recruit those guys in a couple of years. Just a few of them. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, same sentiment. Obviously echoed. Happy for Jalen and Mose and continuous networking potential that they're building, and Jalen getting the respect that he deserves. It's super cool to see.
And some Magic related items to go through before we get too deep into free agency here. The Magic sort of started the pre-free agency process. We talked about the deadlines. A few weeks ago, several Magic players had deadlines. Just to give you all some updates here, Trevelyan Queen, the Magic extended the qualifying offer. As we record this, I don't know if he signed that qualifying offer just yet, but they did not extend qualifying offers to Kevon Harris, Admiral Schofield, who has actually signed a deal overseas, so will be playing internationally. And the Magic did not extend a qualifying offer to Chuma Okeke, which is effectively ending Chuma's time here in Orlando. Do we want to talk about Chuma just for a moment here before we mention some of the other moves?
Good luck. I don't know, man. I don't know. I had high hopes for Chuma, and it just didn't pan out. I will never forget his offhand in front of the ball and his face on the jumper. He gave us some fun flashes early on, but ultimately just wasn't a fit. I'm really not trying to be disrespectful, but I am being that. And but I do wish the best to him regardless. Stinks because that is a person, that's a player that just ultimately is going to have to find a new home, whether that be in the NBA or overseas or whatever it might be. But I assume he's going to try to get in with a team there in the league, obviously, and then go from there. But yeah.
I agree. All right, let's move on to free agency. So first of all, I think where we have to start is that yesterday, so what was that, Saturday, we got the reports from Shams and I think Woj that Paul George was set to meet with a few teams at the start of free agency, the Clippers, the 76ers, and the Orlando Magic. The fact that we even were in consideration to have a meeting with Paul George and maybe use all that cap space that we had to bring Paul George in, I think is just a massive step for the organization and shows that, hey, like we actually are becoming a destination again. Now, it doesn't seem like that meeting ended up happening, just how quickly things, and we'll talk about KCP in a minute here, but just how quickly that deal happened after news started to come out that Philadelphia looked like they were the front runners to sign Paul George. But what were your guys' reactions to getting the news that we were going to get a meeting with Paul George?
We're back. We're back in the mix. And it was a respect thing. And also just an acknowledgement that like the Magic, this isn't the Magic of the past decade. And that was what it meant the most to me. Because going into that, you hear that, and then quickly after you come to the you come to the point where you're like, I understand that we probably don't get Paul George. But to be there with the other two teams and the Clippers and Philly, like both have their history, and Clippers being where he was at with Kawhi and just them trying to do stuff there. That's still a big, obviously large market and notable team. And then you get to Philly, and it's like they're just trying to get over the hump. They've got Joel Embiid, and that's the conversations you're in. And people could say like, "Oh, you guys just have cap space," but at the end of the day, like the Detroit Pistons weren't getting a Paul George meeting, or even a report about trying to link them. So for me, it wasn't a cap space thing as much as it was the Magic are building something special. And so from that aspect, and who knows what happened between now and then and now, why the Magic moved so quickly to KCP and why that pivot, and if the meeting even was a thing. But you have to think that something happened, something transpired between last night and now for people to all be officially in agreement like the Magic were one of the three meetings. And then it's just maybe the Magic caught wind of he's probably not coming here. Let's not waste our time. And you pull the pivot, which kudos to our front office for not being blinded by the lights of like, oh, Paul George wants a meeting. And instead just doing what's best for the team. They earned a lot of front office, but like brownie points in my opinion for what I think of them.
Yeah. Holding on to that thought really fast before I talk about my reaction. I love what you said earlier in our group chat. It was like, yeah, maybe they got wind that he was just using them for leverage. And I like immediately started imagining like Jeff Weltman, FaceTiming Paul George. Is this true? Use this for leverage? Well, take this. Meeting's canceled. And then hangs up.
You can't fire me. We quit.
Yeah, exactly. I just picture Jeff Weltman like his glasses falling off. Oh yeah.
No, dude, never happening.
Oh man, but yeah. So kudos to the front office for whatever reason canceling and not just sitting there waiting. Like that's what we talked about. We were terrified when they talked about Shams reported that the meetings were going to be late Pacific time Sunday night. I'm like, well, dang, if we wait that long and we're the last meeting, everybody else is signed and then we're left, with what? So yeah, kudos to the front office. But yeah, yesterday when that report came out, I was just shocked. Like I've been very open about not wanting to sign Paul George, at least for like a 4-year max. Like, yeah, even like a 3. There's a lot I didn't want to do with Paul George. Thought he was too old, too expensive, all that kind of stuff. But when that report came out yesterday in the last 24 hours, I slowly like talked myself into like, okay, this is cool. Like this is good. Like he's a good player, and he's gonna be able to like train Paolo and Franz for 4 years. Like that'll be cool. I mean, we won't have any money, but whatever. So now that it's come out that he's more than likely, barring some kind of miraculous move by the Magic, he's not going to come to Orlando. I'm back to being okay with it. KCP's a cool move. We'll talk more about him and everything. But yeah, it was kind of a wild 24 hours.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think both of you guys sort of hit every important point there. The Magic are back. Kudos to Jeff and Anthony Parker for, yeah, sure, this is a great opportunity, but hey, if this is going to put us at risk for something that we don't really know how likely it is anyways, we need to pivot and start making moves to improve our team regardless. And there were a lot of whispers that our front office wasn't going to do anything. I feel like most of that was done in jest, but when you refer back to the previous seasons and even this year's trade deadline where we sort of wanted the Magic to push on the gas a little bit and they didn't, it's like, okay, at some point we've talked about this really since the playoffs ended. At some point, you need to make the move forward. And what was most shocking to me about the potential of meeting with Paul George is like, to this point, you haven't decided to step on the gas at all. And you're just saying F it and slamming the NOS button, because that's what that would have done to this team, just in terms of like expectations and, the ability to contend, which would have been really cool. I can't lie. You bring Paul George in and all of a sudden you're one of the favorites to come out of the East. That's what would have happened. But again, just to their credit for being aggressive enough to pursue a meeting like that, but also having, the ability and the awareness to say like, hey, this probably isn't very likely. We're probably just being used as leverage here. Let's go ahead and pivot and go after the guys that we know we really want and that we know we can get. And let's lead that into the conversation to talk about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who earlier this evening, I think it was Jeff Zilgett first of USA Today, and then Shams and Chris Haynes and Woj all came through to confirm it, that the Magic and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope have come to agreement on a 3-year, $66 million deal, with that third year being a player option. Just want to talk a little bit about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope here. So first of all, he is 31 years old, going to be 32 years old, but a 2-time NBA champion, 2020 with the Los Angeles Lakers, and then last year with the Denver Nuggets. And this year, averaged 10.1 points per game, 2.4 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.3 steals, shot 46% from the floor, shot 40% from behind the arc on 4.1 attempts, and received all defensive team votes. Borderline elite defender, elite three-point shooter, fits the Magic DNA perfectly. People have been saying, hey, you need to surround Franz and Paolo as shooters, and they went out and got one of the best shooters in free agency.
And in that, they did the things I talked about at the top of staying true to the identity they've built, being that he's a great defender, like you said, borderline elite. He also, you address the need of what you needed, 3-point shooting. And I think maybe what hasn't been talked about yet that I would love to highlight is that they address the need for durability. In Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's career, I did the math, out of 892 possible games, he has played 835 of them. He has played 93.6% of the possible games in his 11-year career so far.
I like that.
That is what I love about this too, is just that everything that they did makes sense. Like every part, every way that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope fits into all of those things. Durability, staying true to your identity, and also addressing need. You hit all three of those main points within one signing. And that, in my opinion, makes it a home run signing. So that Kentavious, man, he's going to be awesome. Do I wish he was a little younger? Of course. But I still think that he's got some juice in the tank, despite playing so many miles on those legs. But he still has been producing.
In addition to all those things, for me, he's got 2 rings.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you can't argue with that. 2 rings, and not just 2 rings. Like, he was the starting 2 guard on 2 NBA championship teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's worth its price right there. Like, the amount of experience that he's going to bring to this team. You know, he's got more rings than the whole team combined. That was obvious, but I was going to say something else. But yeah, he's got 2 rings that you can't put a price on that. Like, that's incredible experience that he brings to this team. And then I do want to add, I hesitate to say this. I don't want to say this as like bringing up this or anything. Like, we all make mistakes or whatever. I'm genuinely saying this. When is the last time the Magic hired somebody with like a criminal record? Like, I don't want to shed light on it. Like, it was a mistake. Like, all those things, people make mistakes. But I'm being serious. Like, this almost feels like a change a little bit in the front offices and even maybe ownership's mentality. Again, those were years ago. KCP's mistakes. He's been out of trouble for like 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it's been now. Probably 3 years.
7 years.
7 years? It's been that long? Oh, I'm so old.
That's when the original arrest was. I believe that's when he got in trouble for like violating the probation. But no, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we, not to plug our Patreon, but we just had an exclusive Zoom call the other night with our patrons, and we were talking about this exactly. Plugging the Patreon, patreon.com/the 6 Man Show. Yeah. But we were having this conversation of like, so far, like, the Magic have tried to bring in guys that, you know, are blemish free, right? And at some point, like, hey, you may need to stray away from that a little bit if you're looking to bring in more talent. And again, we're not trying to, you know, like, paint KCP, you know, in any type of negative light. No. But that's just a fact about his history. And, you know, that's a difference from what we've seen with this front office. And I'm not mad at it. By all means, like, the last several years, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has been, you know, an outstanding guy, and they wouldn't bring him in by any means if they were worried about him being a bad influence on this roster, not being a chemistry fit. So I have no issues with it at all, but it is notable because it is different from the way that they've approached things in the past.
Yeah, let me just circle back to it so I can put the bow on my first statement. Yes, like you said, great guy the last, you know, several years. I went on his Instagram today, obviously, had to follow him. Beautiful family. Like, he's got 7 kids, I think, something like that. Like, looks like, obviously we don't know him, looks like he's got his life together. It's all beautiful. So I just want to make sure I come back to the end there after I open that can of worms. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely different for this front office. But hey, I am certainly not mad about it at all.
Yeah, I jokingly in our group chat said, like, Magic have an edge to him now. Like, we're hiring someone with any type of background like that is something that is off the beaten path for our front office. But to be fair, you've not really had a chance to sign guys that are long tenured in the league. You've really been focused on building through the draft. A lot of these guys way too young to have gotten into much legal trouble because they've been married to basketball their entire life, but and too busy in the gym, but and distracted from everything else. So yeah, it's still interesting, but a lot of fun in the sense of just like, we're building. Like, the front office has now just locked eyes on like building for the future. You sign a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with his championships and all that in the last few years, just goes to show you that they're ready to move forward. And this is no longer official, not a rebuild. Like, we established that last year, but now moving forward with these signings like KCP, it's like, oh, you're addressing needs. and you're just continuing to put your foot on the gas at this point.
And can we just like talk about the defense like for just a moment?
Crazy.
Like it's been what everyone's talked about on Twitter, but I just feel like we have to talk about it. Like Jalen and KCP in that backcourt. And then obviously Paolo and Franz, they're no pushovers. And then even if it's Wendell or Hartenstein or whoever, I mean, or Jonathan Isaac slotting in there sometimes, like, come on now. That's insane. Like literally two of the probably 5, 7, at worst 10 best defenders, like backcourt defenders in the same backcourt. I mean, good grief. That's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces for me, Kevin, you already alluded to it, but the fact that he has the championship experience. Part of what excited me about bringing Clay in was the guy's bringing 4 rings in. You know, he's bringing that level of experience, and he can like speak to what that requires of you if you want to get to that level. Now, the Clay stuff, we talked about that on the last couple episodes, never got close. It seems like he hasn't officially signed anywhere, but it was reported that he's only meeting with the Clippers, the Lakers, the Mavericks, and the 76ers, from what I understand. So it doesn't seem like, I mean, we probably still have money to make that move. If I just don't know that it makes sense now that we brought in KCP. You would assume that if you're bringing Clay in, it would be to start, and it just doesn't seem like there's enough minutes to go around in that scenario. But I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about, is bringing that just experience, like playoff experience, championship pedigree, being around guys like LeBron James and Anthony Davis and Nikola Jokic. Like, we have Franz and we have Paolo, guys that are trying to get to that level. And here comes the guy that can speak into like what those guys do on a daily, like day-to-day basis, and bring that to those guys. Now, as excited as I am about the KCP signing, some people are expressing their concerns or maybe their disappointment with the fact that we're not using this cap space on getting Paul George, which seems a little bit odd to me, because up until like 2 days ago, the Klay Thompson stuff, the Paul George stuff, all seemed like the longest of long shots. And it seems like maybe with that news coming out that the Magic were getting a meeting, people got their hopes up super quickly. And I would just want to remind people that, yes, you're missing out on Paul George, but most of the time these days, free agency doesn't happen through free agency. It happens through trades. And adding a contract like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and if you add additional guys, you're going to be able to like put enough money together to make a move for a guy like that if they become available. So just because we're missing out on that right now doesn't mean that it makes it impossible like moving forward.
Right. The also like, yeah, the bottom line there is that this team is young. Like we just because you decided that we were ready to move forward and take a leap that big as Paul George in the last 24 hours, and that the front office entertained it, doesn't automatically put you on that timeline. Just, you know, regardless, like at that point, what you're looking at right now is you're still building, and you're putting yourself in a position where year 2 down the line, like next offseason, the offseason after, setting yourselves up for like people want to come play for you. And also it makes it easy to trade for those players too. We are shifting toward not many guys, not many big names are going to make it to free agency anymore. They're just going to sign extensions, demand a trade, whatever they want to do, right? Because ultimately we're in the player empowerment era, which we've been in for a while. But now it's getting to the point where players have gotten smarter and like, oh, I can just get an extension and then we can request a trade and work from there. Or I just demand a trade in general.
And I think teams prefer that because now they're not losing the asset for nothing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Nobody's walking. And so it makes sense all the way around. So the Paul George thing, like him, this whole scenario is very unique. And I think maybe one of the last of its kind in terms of like in any type of large volume too. So from here on out, I do think like even this coming trade deadline in February, you're going to be hearing there's a disgruntled star, and maybe you'll be hearing that the Magic are working on a package to trade for someone, or we just get the news, right? I think that's a very real possibility. Just because we don't do something now with a superstar or a star in general doesn't mean that that's not possible come, you know, the new year, basically.
I also think it's weird when you're talking about fans' reactions to the Paul George thing. free agency, it takes two to tango. Right?
Yeah.
The Magic can have all the money in the world, which in some ways we did, or could have, at least we wanted to. You could throw all the money in the world at Paul George. Paul George still has to desire that and desire to come here, right? And so money isn't everything. Just because the Magic had money doesn't mean we should have been first place, second place to get Paul George. We were always going to be last place, if you ask me. If the teams had enough money to actually afford what Paul George wanted, we were always going to be last place. It doesn't mean we're not in a good position. It just means we don't have a Joel Embiid, right? Like, Joel Embiid is unlike anything that we have on our roster. Now, is he annoying? Yeah. He's an MVP, though, right? Like, that's a championship contending team. Oh, yeah, and they also have this guy named Tyrese Maxey who's going to come back, too. So the idea for Paul George, which it looks like it's inevitable, going to Philadelphia, it makes sense for him. It makes sense for Philadelphia, all those things. And so to be mad at the front office for, like, quote unquote missing that, I really don't understand that. Like, it's not like we were front runners this whole time and then fumbled it. Like, we've always been the underdogs in this. And so, yeah, it's weird to me.
It's also not like he's 30. Paul George isn't 30 with 2 big contracts left in his career. He's got 1 big contract left and understands that, even though, like, the big quote that circulated was Paul George talking about on his podcast most recently, or 2 episodes ago or something at this point, him talking about, like, I want to go to a team that plays the right way. And everyone's like, oh, well, I bet that means you don't want to go play with Joel Embiid, who shoots all these free. It's like, bro, Joel Embiid still is Joel Embiid, and he gets to the free throw line. It doesn't matter. Like, sure, you can say it's a disgusting way, and yes, it is boring, but they win. Like, they're able to win games when Joel Embiid is healthy. That's the caveat. But Paul George said all this, but he's like, I still want to be on a winning team. Doesn't mean I'm chasing a ring. But guys, that doesn't mean that he doesn't want a championship. He's Paul George. He's looking for one. He's looking for it. And I think, like, that's ultimately what it's coming down to. He's 34. He'll be 35 next May. He's got a couple good seasons left. So, well, that is, like, he just never fit the timeline. He was a fun pipeline dream for the Magic, just to have a cool couple years. But like Kevin said, takes 2 to tango. Paul George ultimately wants a ring, and I understand it. I mean, he is getting to the end of his career, and a lot of these guys value it. And I can't say that if I was not in the same spot that I'd be like, oh man, I'm a great player and I know it. But just to further that and cement my legacy, I want to win a ring. So,
last thing for me on Paul George, the reason that I will have 0 issue sleeping tonight is we still have Paolo Banchero. If we did not have a guy that I believed could be one of the best players in the NBA, maybe I would feel like we missed out a bit more. But we still have that guy that I think we all believe is still going to be good enough to be the best guy on a title team someday. And all we've been talking about the last couple of years is you need to optimize what Paolo Banchero does well. You need to put shooters around Paolo Banchero. It looks like Gary Harris is on his way out. Bringing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is literally like if you gave Gary Harris steroids, right? Mm-hmm. Just as good, if not better of a shooter, better of a defender at this point in his career, and is much more reliable health-wise than Gary Harris, and has 2 championship rings and that experience that he can draw from and can pass down to our young guys. So this is a big upgrade at that starting shooting guard position. And there were reports that coming out over the course of the last couple of weeks that the Magic were comfortable with Jalen Suggs being the full-time point guard. We had our questions on whether or not that was true. This leads me to believe that that is true. And whether or not that's the right answer, I don't know. Do I believe Jalen is capable of getting to that point? Yes. Do I think he showed that necessarily last season? No. But the improvement that Jalen showed from year 2 to year 3, if he can do that just even a little bit from year 3 to year 4 in terms of organizing the offense and handling the ball, we will be just fine. That, to me, is yet to be seen. But if the front office is saying they're comfortable with doing that, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt until we're proven wrong in that regard.
You've also got Paolo and Franz who handle the ball. So as much as it would have been nice to have a guy, rest in peace, my Tyus Jones dream, as much as it would have been nice to have him to set the table, as Paolo put as well, and kind of his wish list of really what it felt like a wish list for a point guard to lead the team. As nice as that would have been, you still have Paolo and Franz that are able to handle the ball. Jalen can handle the ball, but I don't think any of them are going to have full time bring the ball up, start the offense roles. And honestly, I don't know that you need it. It was nice, but it feels a little bit like a luxury, not a necessity. This team doesn't need a guy that is just pass first to run this team. I mean, you just almost got to round 2 without one of those guys. You had Markelle Fultz, but anyway. So, I just, it's not the end of the world to me that you don't have a lead guard. And this team will just continue to get better and better, whether it be through free agency or trades, development. And this is exciting. Hopefully we sign one. I think we will definitely sign one more, maybe 2 more if you don't get the guy that's like 25 a year, 24. But it's super exciting.
Well, let's talk. Actually, go ahead, Kev.
I was just going to say it's just kind of fun fact and strange. Obviously, there's a lot of context missing here, but in the 2024-25 season, our highest paid player will be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, which is kind of interesting. The highest paid paid player on the Magic, right? For now, could be. You're right. That's true. We got about $30 million to play with, but it's just kind of funny. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the rest of that money.
I think the last thing that I want to ask you guys before we move on and into Kevin's conversation with Pat Rooney, roughly $30 million in cap space left. There are still some guys out there. For me, I would still like to see us upgrade at the center position. And I think most of that just comes from a durability standpoint. We've had that conversation about Wendell Carter 1,000 times, right? A couple of centers that you could have targeted, Jonas Valanciunas, Andre Drummond, both off the board. Isaiah Hartenstein, a guy that Magic fans have been talking about for the last several years, it feels like, but especially in the last couple of months as he's entering free agency. He, I guess, was meeting with the Oklahoma City Thunder earlier tonight in Eugene, Oregon. The Oklahoma City front office team made the trip up there. No deals have been announced there, but for me, I think if we are going to do something with not all of that $30 million, but some of that $30 million, a good chunk of it, I think that would be my target. And people have asked, like, is Hartenstein like really an upgrade over Wendell? Number one in durability, yes. Mm-hmm. And most other statistical categories, like per 100 possessions, outside of like shooting and spacing, you would give the edge to Hartenstein. So to me, I would like to see that move and that sort of be the final upgrade of the offseason. But what do you guys think?
So first, you've got to look at what you've got and say what makes the most sense.
Breaking news. Yeah. Mason Plumlee, 1-year deal to the Suns.
So the Bobby Marks put out like a digestible roster, like depth chart table for people. But right now you're currently looking at your starting lineup on opening night of Jalen Suggs, KCP, Franz, Paolo, Wendell, which I love, to be honest with you. And then for your reserves, with obviously the free agents being listed on here as well, Fultz, Gary Harris, Joe Ingles, Mo Wagner. The reports have all said Ingles and Mo Wagner are likely coming back. So your bench, and I'll just break it down from the way of like who played last year, like was always in rotation. Cole Anthony, Jonathan Isaac, and then you can put Mo and Joe in there for right now. That's 9 guys in a rotation. But obviously you've got your AB, your Jet, whatever. You could say J.I., or not J.I., Joe, well, I guess technically still J.I. Joe Ingles takes basically like minimal, he doesn't play much at all. So it's like, what do you do in this scenario when you're looking at a big picture? You could sign Hartenstein, like you said, Jonathan, and then look for a deal for Dell, or you just slide Dell to the bench. Because ultimately what you're wanting to do with Dell is upgrade something. Truthfully, I think, and I have, like, I'm just saying this, truthfully, I think that if you did trade Dell, you maybe are trading Cole Anthony in a package. Because just the more that you look at this team and the way they're building, trending more towards defense, and I don't know that Cole Anthony, like we've just seen him struggle, especially last season, at a lot of points. where it's like maybe he doesn't really fit the identity of the team anymore, and you move on from Dell and Cole and you add another piece. But I don't think that you're adding anything to the starting lineup, especially if you sign Hartenstein. You're basically bolstering your bench, which I love, and that's what you should do at this point. So that's kind of the big picture. Then we'll see what they end up actually doing, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, for me, with the remaining money, the Hartenstein stuff, potentially. I definitely agree, obviously, that he definitely improves the team in a lot of ways. The part that worries me a little bit is where he doesn't improve the team is a place that we really need to be better as far as like spacing the floor. Like Wendell obviously spaces the floor a lot more than iHeart, as people have nicknamed him. So that concerns me. But putting that aside, other guys that I might be interested in. The biggest question mark for me is Jet Howard. Like, who is Jet Howard? Like, we've heard a lot of good things so far this offseason about Jet Howard from people, around the Magic and stuff. But is he good enough to be a backup, say, 2, right? Is he going to be the backup to KCP? If not, then that's where I think some of this money might need to go. Like, do you go out and get a Gary Trent Jr.? Do you go out and get a Malik Beasley? Do you go out and get someone like that to back up KCP? I think that's really important. The bench was really good for the Magic this past season. It helped the Magic a lot in large stretches of this season. And so I think it's really important to keep that continuity. I know you talk about the Tyus Jones dream being dead. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. If there's a world where the Magic want to potentially move on from Cole Anthony being the backup 2 or backup 1. I mean, I don't know if that's the case. Or let me back up, actually. Anthony Black. We got to talk about him too. Like, Anthony Black is still there. Like, is he the backup 1 behind Jalen Suggs? And then what do you do with Cole Anthony? Like, so maybe Tyus Jones doesn't fit. Like, if the Magic believe in Anthony Black, then maybe the Tyus Jones dream is dead. However, maybe they don't believe in him. And I don't know. There's a lot. My biggest thing, though, I would say is the backup 2 position. Like, what does that look like? Is it Cole? Is it going out and signing somebody else? That's my biggest question mark outside of center.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily like a wrong answer. I think, like, for me, it just comes from like, I know that we're going to be without Dell for 15 to 20 games next year. And what do we do in that instance? Mo and Goga were fine last year, but I think, we want to continue to improve the roster and take like another step up this year. So, but we've got $30 million left. You mentioned a few of those guys, throw Buddy Hield's name in there. Like, there's, if the Magic want to go out and get more shooting and bolster the bench, there are plenty of opportunities to do that still in free agency. But the fact that we haven't heard anything else yet leads me to believe that maybe we are in that Hartenstein conversation, and we're literally just waiting for more free agency news, as everybody's begging to bring back tampering, because this version of free agency kind of sucks, right? Like, it's pretty boring of just sitting here. We just got the Mason Plumlee news like an hour ago or a few minutes ago, and then it was an hour before, in between that and the Valanciunas, and now we just got news that Najee Marshall has agreed on a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Dallas Mavericks.
It's here's the similarity, the comparison I will make. Let's say you have the answers to an entire test, right? You have all the answers, but to make it look less obvious, you're slower to finish the test. And it's like you're just sitting there like waiting for the clock. Like, I'm gonna fill this whole thing out. It's done. I got 100%. I'm gonna wait, or I missed a couple, whatever. I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna turn this paper in like when I see other people start turning it in. So you've got these teams
just hypothetically, right, Luke? Just hypothetically.
Hypothetically, I've never been in this situation.
Right, of course, definitely not.
Yeah, no. And then that's how I feel about this whole thing. You can't tell me these guys, like, they respect the new fines enough with the CBA. They respect it enough to not be, jumping out the gun and like signing a play from an opposite team at 6:01. But you're telling me negotiations and everything were made, and the whole conversation about the fit on the team or whatever is done by like 6:45 when some of these teams jump the gun. It might be under review for a fine from the NBA at this rate. But I do think that's what's happening. They already know, because some of these deals were happening way too soon for a whole conversation. Like, that is an in-depth, huge decision in your life. and so, yeah, that's what I like in it too. You got all the answers to the test, but you give it some time. That's why it's like, dude, just remove the fines again or whatever. Go back to what it was. and let's just get some news at 6:01. That's way more fun.
Or just go all the way, go back to midnight, and let's really get crazy. That was it was like an event. It was like, when the Avengers came out.
It's like Black Friday awesome. Though. Like, I'm so glad that Black Friday now starts at like 5 p.m. for the people that are shoppers on Black Friday. We don't need the midnight stuff anymore, right? We're all grown-ups. We got jobs. I just want to sleep, man. That's all.
All right. You guys have anything else on free agency before we move on?
No.
Not me. Just let's see what happens.
All right, we want to take a quick second here to give a shout out to our wonderful patrons, the folks that help financially support each and every show. As I shamelessly plugged a little bit ago, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show. Every episode, we give a special shout out to our Hall of Fame and elite tier patrons. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with the Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson, Tulo, Ellis, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Francis Warren, Pierre A, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Dan Moll, Bobby Skinner, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Dalek Lopez, Fuchsia, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95, Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Rican, Shahim 177, Obi the Don, Himlo, Ben Himro, Arm Prov 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Mysterious Mosley, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Walsh, Fritz, Bruv Sal, Case and Green, Santi Leon, Kane Eckler, The Distract, Ahmad Simpson, Chansu, Tom Gadsden, Dead Air, Richard Tuttle, Jeremiah Quintero, Magic Wired, Debo 1980, Magic Matt, Michael Thompson, Mama Richmond, Next Napa, What's Up Playoffs 2024, Dylan Fay, David Duffy, Smith Sheiks, Bueno Time, Stantino 1995, Suggs Muggs, Daniel Anderson, Barry McElcaney, and Will Spivey. Again, if you would like to join our Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show. Now let's get into our interview with Pat Rooney from the Daily Camera and buffzone.com.
All right, Orlando Magic fans, as you know, we've said it many times on this show, we are big fans of local sports coverage because there's no way the national media can actually know everything about every team and every player. And so today I'm really glad to be joined by Pat Rooney, who covers Colorado University athletics for buffzone.com and the Daily Camera. Pat Rooney, thanks so much for joining the show. How's it going out there in Colorado today?
Doing well. Weather's gorgeous. Beautiful day here. And, summertime. It's going when we cover college sports. This is your time to maybe take a little bit of a breather, although this week has been pretty busy with a big showing for Colorado in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you about that in a moment. It's kind of crazy. 3 guys drafted. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, I got to ask you, you've been around Colorado athletics for a long time. We talked about this before we started. How insane was the Deion Sanders craziness that began last year? I'm a diehard Florida State fan. I know a lot of our viewers are as well. How crazy was the madness of prime time, and that it's still going on even now?
It's still going on, and it's pretty wild to go from a team that arguably was the worst power conference program in the nation when Carl Dorrell was let go in 2022, and they stumbled to the finish line, 1-win season that year. It was just a low point of a program that has had quite a few of them, to be honest, in the last 2-ish decades or so. They had a good season in 2016, but it's been pretty dry other than that, football-wise, around here. But to see the excitement around the program, to see the attention around the program, even before they'd even played a game last year, which is incredible to watch. And then obviously the hot starts kind of made them national darlings. I still think the jury is out about exactly how good this program can be under Deion Sanders, but certainly the excitement and the attention around it has been something incredible to observe.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see that turnaround so quickly. And yeah, obviously a lot of us Florida State guys are definitely rooting for Coach Prime to do well there. Let's pivot a little bit to basketball. You mentioned a pretty historic week, for Colorado, having 3 guys drafted, 2 guys in the top 18 and another at pick number 42. I'd like to ask you, just before we talk about Da Silva, for a little bit of context, where he's coming from. What was this past season like for Colorado? 26-11, 13-7 in the Pac-12, ended up making the NCAA tournament, losing in the round of 32. I do have to add, again, as a Florida State fan, I was thrilled when they beat the University of Florida. So thank you, Colorado, for doing that. Our audience will be split on that comment, but that's fine. But yeah, how would you kind of summarize this past season, that Colorado had on the basketball court?
Yeah, and they lost to Florida State early in November at a tournament in Daytona Beach that I was at. But they got to where they kind of expected and wanted to be by the end of the year. They won 2 games in the NCAA tournament. Were relegated to that first 4 rounds, so they won there. Beat Florida in the game that you mentioned. Was just a wild. I mean, both teams hitting 100 in regulation. How often do we see that anymore in college basketball? Just a wildly entertaining game that the Buffs won in the last second. And they finished strong. They finished 3rd in the conference. They got to the conference championship game and lost to Oregon. And all of that was pretty much where they hoped to be by the end of the year, kind of that realm in the NCAA tournament, threatening for a Sweet 16 spot. But they didn't get there easily. It was a year of a lot of injury issues. I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but I think the top 6 or 7 guys in the rotation or, kind of on the roster that you plan to roll out the season with, they only played together in like 14 or 15 games. Injuries were a constant problem throughout the year. And not like one guy going down with an ACL for the year and you adjust. It was this guy being out for a few games here. And Cody Williams, the top pick of all those, number 10 overall to Utah, he missed, I think it was 13 games total, but he did it like in different time. He missed some games early because of a wrist injury and missed some games late because of an ankle injury. And then he was really hobbled in the postseason. He definitely was not himself. Cody Williams wasn't during that NCAA tournament run. So definitely a successful season. The 26 wins was the most in program history. But they didn't get there easily. It didn't come easily this year. In the middle of the year, you kind of felt like this team was underachieving a little bit. Maybe not so much underachieving, but really falling short of their goals because of injuries. I mean, guys just were out of the lineup and they were kind of turning to other guys and, weren't sure game to game who might be available, like in January and late December and really into February. But they got healthy and they got on a run late and kind of got to where they wanted to be. But it didn't happen maybe the way you would have drawn it up at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of that team success culminating this past week with, as I mentioned, those 3 guys being drafted. As someone who doesn't follow Colorado athletics very much, I'm sure most of our audience probably doesn't. Where does that rank as far as like history of Colorado? Is that the most they've ever had drafted, or how special was this past week for basketball?
I looked it up. They did have in the 1981 draft when it was still a 10-round draft. They had 3 guys go, but all 3 guys were, I think the top overall was like number 96, I think it was. So not comparable to what we saw this week with 2 guys going in the top 18 and 3 in the top 42. So they've never had anything like that since the draft was shortened to 2 rounds way back in 1989. Colorado's never had multiple guys go in any draft. So to have 2 at any place in the draft, let alone as high as they did in the first round, and 3, in the 2-round version of the draft, completely unprecedented for this program. So it's kind of a sign of the kind of guys that they've been recruiting at Colorado. And, except for Cody Williams, Coach Tad Boyle he's a little old school and he still wants the kind of recruit and develop approach to building a program. Cody Williams is the first one and done they've had, but most of their guys that do get drafted are guys that have been in the program for multiple years, guys that have gotten better every year along the way. And that certainly was the case with KJ Simpson and Tristan da Silva.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear such success there for Colorado. And now we are going to pivot to the guy that Magic fans want to hear the most about, Tristan da Silva, drafted by the Magic, 18 overall. We'll talk about some nuances about him and his game, of course, as we go through. But could you just summarize for Magic fans in a couple sentences Tristan da Silva, the basketball player, what can Magic fans expect? What have you seen over the 4 years at Colorado about Tristan da Silva, the basketball player?
He'll bring a little bit of everything to the table. He's, I think at the NBA they got him now listed at 6'9" or 6'8". He was 6'9". It's funny how they always shrink a little bit after they get out of college and get into the NBA. But versatile, long, everything I'm sure you've read up on in the last few days on him is accurate. Great court vision, high IQ. Good shooter, can score at three levels. He can certainly knock down a 3-pointer and take advantage of matchups inside that are favorable to him. Can handle the ball a little bit. There's probably not one thing that he's, I guess, spectacular at. He's not going to lead the league in 3-point shooting. He's not going to go out and get 10 rebounds a game, but he's going to do a little bit of everything for you. He can get a rebound and even lead a break a little bit. Like I said, he can post up if need be. He's got great vision, can find open shooters if need be. He can go in and grab a few rebounds if need be. So, like I said, there's not one thing that he's going to really stand out at, but he's a really kind of classic jack of all trades.
Yeah, that's awesome. He's kind of had, by some measures, at least for us on the outside looking in, a unique path to where he is now, ending up at Colorado and now in the NBA. Here in Orlando, we have a couple of players that are on the German national team, Franz and Mo Wagner. We know that Tristan has German roots, born in Munich, raised, it sounds like, for a lot of his maybe all of his upbringing there in Germany. What do you know about his path, his family situation? How did he end up at Colorado and ultimately now in the NBA?
Yeah, it's interesting. He was recruited at the time that COVID was going on. He never saw the campus before he actually got there.
Wow.
But yes, recruited out of Germany. And, I don't even know if he spent much time in America before he got here. But his path to college basketball is kind of set by his older brother. His older brother, Oscar da Silva, was a very good player at Stanford. I'm sure I don't know exactly where he's at now, but I know he's playing pro back in Europe. I don't know if it's exactly in Germany, but a very good player at Stanford. So he had his older brother to kind of set that path of going to America to play college basketball. And then there was a familiarity with the Pac-12 and with Oscar da Silva playing at Stanford. It's interesting. Fans around here remember this, but nationally, I don't know how much this was on the radar. The year before, I should say, the year before Tristan da Silva, I should say, committed. This was in the spring of 2020. Stanford and Tristan's older brother was playing at the event center here in Boulder. And there was a big collision. The Buffs big man, Evan Batty, who was just a big hulking forward, had a bit of a fast break. Oscar da Silva was down there trying to take a charge. Two big men collided and exploded. And Oscar, unfortunately, got the worst of it. He was on the ground. You could see his head was bleeding. He wound up being okay. He had a bit of a laceration. But it was kind of a silent moment in arena while they tended to him, and the teams kind of regrouped, and everyone cheered for Oscar as he left the floor. It was a bit of an emotional moment, right? But it was a few months later that Tristan da Silva signed as kind of a late signee with Colorado. And, all this was fresh in their minds, like, oh, even though his older brother got run over in Boulder, then at least there was still a good enough connection that Tristan came here and became teammates with Evan Batty, the Colorado player on the other end of that play. So a little bit of an interesting background there. But, Tristan was in that boat with a lot of recruits were that year that never seen the campus before he arrived that year. But as far as coming to America, that path was set a little bit by his older brother. And Tristan, in his way, was kind of following in his footsteps.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Wagner brothers who play in Orlando. Mo Wagner, the older brother, went to Michigan. Franz followed his footsteps. I did not know that story about Oscar, or Tristan's brother Oscar, with that injury and everything, and then he ended up playing with his teammate, with the guy that did the injury. That's pretty wild. One of the unique things about Tristan da Silva, the fact that we don't see this as often as we used to. He played all 4 years at Colorado before going to the NBA draft. So you've been able to see the progression of Tristan da Silva over 4 years, as opposed to some guys who cover teams, they see him over, a handful of months. So you've got to see Tristan da Silva a lot over the years. Yeah. Where would you say he's maybe improved the most over the 4 years from when he arrived to Boulder to now as he's entering the NBA?
The first thing's the physicality. He came in as a freshman on a veteran team that made the NCAA tournament, actually lost to your Florida State in the second round of the 2021 tournament, the All Indianapolis tournament. Tristan was a true freshman on that team. It was a pretty senior-laden team, and him and Jabari Walker, now at the Portland Trail Blazers, were both freshmen on that Colorado team, kind of bench players, spot minutes here and there. He didn't play a lot early on that team, but kind of came on later in the year. Kind of came on for that bench minute role, would knock down an open three. He had a couple really good games. I remember off the bench hitting some shots as a freshman, but he wasn't really counted upon for the big production on that team. But that grew every year. A lot of that group graduated that year. So as a sophomore, he took on a bigger role. Evan Batty, the gentleman I just mentioned in the Oscar da Silva collision, was a senior on that team, and Jabari Walker was a star on that team. So Tristan still was kind of finding his way as a new starter. And then the last 2 years, he's really kind of taken off a little bit more. As far as where he's improved the most, I think the scoring's just kind of come more with the opportunity. He played a bigger role the last couple of years. His shooting numbers were always pretty solid, but for me, it's the physicality. He got a little bit more physical. He had the highest rebounding average of his career this past year at 5.1. Probably will never be a great rebounder, but certainly made strides in that department. And as an interior defender, I haven't mentioned his defense much yet, but he's a guy who, that versatility will kind of extend to that end of the floor. With his length, he can kind of guard the wing a little bit. And, he showed a little bit more willingness and strength to kind of duke it out a little bit in the middle. And I think the other thing is his court vision. He's always been a pretty good passer, but he was a little bit maybe turnover prone before this year. But he turned it around, had a much more solid assist to turnover rate. Got the numbers at 82 assists against 61 turnovers. And that's with him missing a couple games in the middle of the season because of his own ankle injury. And he came back slowly from that. He had a couple poor shooting games, as he tried to get back into it while his ankle was still not 100%. So, but those are the things as far as the 4-year growth. For me, it's the physicality and the way he was able to cut down his turnovers, particularly his senior year.
That's awesome. Magic fans will love to hear about decreasing turnovers because we have too many of those sometimes. So would love to see Da Silva come in and contribute to fewer turnovers. We've heard a lot from the national media. We heard it from you as well. Very well-rounded player, good at a lot of things, maybe not elite at everything or maybe any one particular thing, but good at a lot of things. As he comes into the NBA, though, what are maybe some weaknesses that Magic fans could be looking out for, and maybe weaknesses that Tristan might be looking to improve on maybe in this offseason before his first NBA season?
Finishing around the rim springs to mind. He's good off the bounce, but maybe sometimes can't quite finish those drives at the rim. I think the spacing more in the NBA might help him in that regard. And I think the other question might be that physicality I mentioned. He improved at college. Will he be able to keep doing that and keep improving as he takes it to the next level and starts battling, even bigger, even more physical guys at the next level? So for me, those are the two things. I think his scoring will be fine. His shooting will be fine. Like I say, he's got great basketball IQ. He can take it off the dribble. He'll be versatile at both ends of the floor. But for me, if there's a question mark, that's it. How is that physicality going to translate to the next level?
Yeah, you mentioned basketball IQ. That's one of the favorite buzzwords of our Magic front office the last several years when they draft guys. The very first thing they mention, high basketball IQ. And they mentioned again, of course, with Tristan da Silva. We've heard about his basketball IQ, but he's also seemingly a very smart guy overall. I think I read he knows 5 languages, fluent in 5 languages. What can you speak to his smarts, maybe both on the court and off the court?
Yeah, speaking 5 languages, that kind of says it all right there, right? But the other part of that IQ is he doesn't doesn't make, even though I said he was turnover prone a little bit, he doesn't make dumb plays. When he wasn't turnover prone this past year, but at the times when he was, it wasn't because of poor decision making. It was, maybe trying to make a move too fast and it goes off his foot, or, just, getting a little bit in a hurry. It wasn't because he was making the wrong play. It was, maybe these little bit of careless things that he needed to address, and in situations maybe slow down a little bit, to, make sure the ball doesn't go awry, so to speak. But he makes a smart play every time. He makes the right play. And I think at the next level, that's, half the battle. He's not going to come in and try to do too much, for one thing. I don't think that's a problem, especially with a guy that's played as much basketball as him, being a 4-year guy. He's not going to come in and try to do too much, try to show what he can do. He's going to come in and stay within himself. I think that IQ kind of shines through in that. He's not going to make the wrong play. Then, the other part of that, I think, comes, IQ and maturity. He's a guy that, he'd be willing to kind of stand up for the team and address questions after a tough loss. And, he wasn't one to sulk or pout or kind of shy away from that. I think that's another great asset when you get to that level. You're playing more games, and there's, therefore going to be more tough losses. How do you respond to that, and so forth? And I think Tristan, with his maturity and his smarts, is well fitted to kind of handle that spotlight.
That's great to hear. Jamal Mosley, head coach of the Magic, also Colorado Buffalo. That's one of his mantras. We never get too high, too low. It's an 82 game regular season. Then in the playoffs, you can't allow one loss to get you down, one big win to get you too high. And it's cool to hear that Tristan da Silva will buy into that, right away. We mentioned earlier 4 years at Colorado. It allows maybe for some unique stories maybe that have come out of that, as opposed to maybe a one and done. Do you have any favorite Tristan da Silva story, maybe from you directly, or you've heard indirectly from someone else throughout his 4 years there in Boulder?
Yeah, that's a tough one. He's not the most, he's great young man, and, in personal, but I wouldn't describe him as the most outgoing personality. He's, I don't know if I got a great behind the scenes stories, but, he's a great teammate. Everyone looked up to him. This past year, they had an interesting mix of holdovers, guys that have been in the program like Da Silva, like KJ Simpson, who went in the second round yesterday. And then kind of, some newcomers. They brought in a transfer center. They had Cody Williams coming in as a true freshman. And, even KJ Simpson, maybe at the beginning of the year, was a bit of a question mark because he had a bit of an up and down sophomore year, and he ended it in a bit of a slump. He was injured and had an illness, and maybe not quite sure what they were going to get out in this past year. Tristan was the glue to all that coming into this year. He was the guy that was going to kind of shoulder the load, set the example, and he did all of those things. KJ Simpson is more of a fiery vocal leader that we saw on the floor, but I would describe Tristan as more of the glue leader in that locker room, the guy that the young guys could look up to and approach and that sort of thing. So, I know that takes time to develop at the NBA level, but, I think he'll fit right in. He kind of handled himself as a pro, especially his last few years.
That's awesome. I hear a lot of similarities to this Magic roster. Magic already have, vocal leaders, guy like Jalen Suggs is one of those guys for us. You might remember him from his days at Gonzaga. Yeah. Cole Anthony, another one. But we also have some other guys that lead by example on the floor, and it sounds like Tristan da Silva could be one of those guys in between that kind of is one of the glue guys to keep it all together. Pat, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for giving some insight on Tristan da Silva, on the context of Colorado and all those great things. This has been great. Why don't you let our viewers and our listeners know kind of where they can find your work as you continue to cover Colorado Buffalo athletics?
Sure. I had a nice kind of pre-draft interview with Tristan late last week, catching up with him. And you can find all our work covering the Buffs at we kind of channel all our Buffalo's coverage at the Boulder Daily Camera at buffzone.com. So real easy to find there. And we had a lot of draft coverage as well. And you kind of maybe sort through things and check out some of the stories from all this past year. Obviously, it was a great season for the team. And like I said, up and down. It didn't come easily. I think it's one thing Tristan and I talked about in that pre-draft interview I just mentioned. This season was almost a good primer for the NBA for him because it was, like I said, a successful one. But it came with many trials and turbulence along the way to get there. And in an NBA season, that's kind of par for the course. So, his 4 years, I think, prepped him really well. I think this past season in particular prepped him really well.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll track down that interview with Tristan. We'll share it on also our social media as well. But anyway, Pat Rooney, thank you so much for joining the show. Appreciate it. Big shout out to Pat Rooney. Appreciate him joining our show. I mentioned it on my conversation with him. The fact that Tristan da Silva was there for 4 years, we definitely wanted to get some insight from someone that got to see all 4 years. And so definitely appreciate Pat kind of sharing a little bit of what his experience was watching Tristan for those 4 years. I think the Magic got a good one. I know you guys talked about it, on the last episode. I haven't gotten to share my thoughts about Tristan da Silva. It just seems like a guy that's going to fit right in from day one. There's a lot of speculation of will he go to the G League in year one like Jet Howard did. The more I look at it, the more I watch him, the more I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's a chance he's second string, maybe third string, forward coming in this season. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think he's going to contribute right away. When he does play, he's going to be able to contribute right away, at least with his shooting, but also with his really high basketball IQ. He's not a terrible defender. And then obviously the conversation with Pat just confirmed all that stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty high on that draft pick by the Magic.
Yeah, again, a big shout out to Pat for joining the show. And we're not that far away from being able to see Tristan da Silva at Summer League. And he'll be alongside Jet Howard and Anthony Black and see maybe what the second unit could potentially look like. So looking forward to that. But yeah, guys, we're sitting here 10:16 Eastern time, and free agency is still just at an absolute crawl. So
crickets.
Unless something crazy happens in the next few minutes, maybe we'll get back on here and talk about a cool deal. But it looks like we're going to be waiting for the next few days here.
Hey, does anybody know how to do like the private plane tracker thing? Because someone did it for OKC to Eugene, Oregon, when they were to obviously implying and backing up the fact that OKC was meeting with Hartenstein. I went on the website that I saw it on, and I don't know enough about where the private. This seems like honestly a Kevin Tucker job, but I don't know where.
I'm going to say it, but that is exactly what I don't know where
the private jets go from in Orlando, what airport, whatever. So maybe that's something that we look into, but we won't post about because we don't want to be an invasion of privacy, but we will of course discuss among ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say, I know where the airplanes leave from.
Okay, that is going to do it for this one. For Luke Sylvia and Kevin Tucker, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to The Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!